I'm continuing to talk about the Ashes to Ash podcast. It's run by Ash Patino. That's how she spells it. I don't know how she wants it pronounced. This is episode 13, Substantial Response. And there was just so much wrong with this. I just had to try to fact check it, and I can't even get to all of it. But I fact checked her videos because she never does. She wants to paint a picture that she wants you to buy into through emotional manipulation. What she does is she uses images, music. The Confederate monument is going to make an appearance. And juxtapose the tragic death of this young man cut down in the prime of life. There's the Confederate monument, always got to put him, downtown Valdosta. Then she has an African-American gentleman. And this goes on every single episode, there he is. He says every single time, we can't continue to kill unarmed black people and get away with it. Well, there was no unarmed or armed anybody. These were kids at school. We haven't ever had a shooting at Lowndes High. Both of the medical examiners that conducted autopsies on KJ's body, both of them said no shooting, stabbing, no strangulation. And what the Johnsons don't want you to know is that their own private pathologist said he was not beaten. So he found a 1/2 inch blunt force trauma hemorrhage, which is basically a bruise. And he claims what killed KJ was somebody dropped a dumbbell on him. It must not have been a very big dumbbell because it only left a 1/2 inch bruise. So anyway, Ash Patino sets this up that way. She wants you to think that it's a race murder. Then she goes through this thing with her friends in the car, and they always talk about, I feel this, I feel that. So in this episode, the things they feel are, I kind of feel like any information the Johnsons bring in is dismissed. It feels like the Johnsons' information is dismissed unilaterally. She mentions an anonymous source who was at the scene. I'm pretty sure I know who that is. It's an EMT. They're a conspiracy theorist. They've been all over social media. There's probably about 20 EMTs and paramedics in our town, and the state representative for Valdosta is an African-American man named Dexter Sharper. And I'm sorry to drag you into this, Dexter, but you're the public official, and I know because I was with you at least one, maybe two of the rallies, because Dexter's family runs a music business, and so they would always bring the sound equipment for the Johnsons, because at this point everybody was trying to help the Johnsons understand what happened, and everybody was trying to bring the DOJ in to bring outside eyes to give comfort and closure, not only to the Johnsons but also to the community, because the Johnsons had made all of these accusations at, they basically tried to implicate over 100 people. They sued approximately 40. And so she says that their anonymous source, who is the EMT, she says that he says, out of the gates, there was a very cavalier attitude about Anderson's findings. And so they say, I feel I would like to look at that. I want to talk to Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft. We need to look at the medical experts, get them to clear the air. Why won't you speak out? To me, it just feels weird. And then she talks about the reward that Sheriff Pock offered. He should have taken the moral high ground. It would have been better to say, I sympathize. Well, okay. You don't know the background, or if you do, you're ignoring it, and I'm just going to give you my very short summary of the background of how we got to this point. So here's Sheriff Chris Prine was in office in 2013 when KJ died. January 2013, investigation ended 2013 of May 2013, and that's when they said accident. So the community, as I said, including our state representative, the civil rights leaders, everybody got out and started conducting rallies because we wanted to bring the DOJ in. And this is what civil rights activists do. And the parents of KJ and his aunts, they all committed civil disobedience at the courthouse. The SCLC president, who's Reverend Floyd Rose, and he's been interviewed by publications like USA Today and, of course, the Valdosta Daily Times and the Orlando Sentinel, I believe. He paid Jackie Johnson's bail when they were all arrested for civil disobedience, and I'm pretty sure they all got probation. If they went to jail, it was for a few hours or maybe overnight. and then they were bailed out, and they never had to spend any real time in jail. They just got probation. Okay, so the community rallied, correct? We brought in Reverend Sharpton. And Reverend Sharpton headlined a rally at Serenity Church. That was where the SCLC president had his church. And $8,000 was raised and given to the Johnsons to give as a reward. Okay, that I believe was the first reward. The Johnsons never offered it. They never offered a reward to the community. However, they both quit their jobs, and Ash and Lydia, they make a big deal about how the Johnsons sat on the corner for 8 years. They haven't been there for 8 years. I do know they quit their jobs for the first 2 years, and they lived off donations because they said that in their depositions. Okay, so the DOJ comes in October of 2013. They investigate for 2.5 years, I believe, and it's closed June 2016. In that time period, the Johnsons file their lawsuits. And it was more than one lawsuit. I think there was like 16. And there was approximately 40 people. So there were 37 that were sued in one lawsuit, including the 3 kids. So these kids right here go with the 37, and then there was 2 additional lawsuits against 2 private businesses, and I can't remember if there were more people included, but at least the owners of the 2 businesses were sued. And as far as I know, they were all dismissed or they were found in the defendant's favor. But I can't get any information on the private businesses, only what people told me, because you can't just, they're not a government agency, so you can't write a FOIA. Okay, so in August 2016, Judge Porter ruled against the Johnsons, and he said, furthermore, you're going to pay $300,000 in attorney's fees because you've victimized all of these people with your frivolous lawsuits. And they were told at every step of the game, this is a frivolous lawsuit. Dismiss it if you have no evidence. Otherwise, you are going to be liable for attorney's fees. Okay, so when Ash gets in here and says all this, and she says, I feel this, I feel that, I feel the other thing, she never mentions any of the facts at all. And I guess I'll just talk about how she spends a lot of time talking to the Johnson family about how nobody in the community cared. And I just did a little short video about the gravestone, which just infuriates me because there's cameras all over this city, but they will just put out something and they expect everybody to believe it hook, line, and sinker, including Ash, because she gasped audibly about this. And the cameras say otherwise. It was because the crypt had to be dug up and that whole slab and headstone with the base had to be moved, and just the weight of it leaning in a direction caused it to snap off from the base. And by snap, I just mean the glue gave way. They're only held together with a thin piece of glue or cement, and it's mostly the weight of the top piece sitting down on the bottom piece that holds it together. But of course, according to the Johnsons, that was another racist piece of vandalism, which is not documented on any of the cameras that I talked about. There's Iron Sky cameras, and the Valdosta Police Department had unmarked patrol cars in the area keeping watch, because we had to learn the hard way. Do not rely on anything that comes out of the Johnson's mouth. Okay, so I just want to talk about the medical examiners from this one because of the statements that Ash makes. And she goes in and talks to Sheriff Polk about, well, why didn't you believe Anderson versus Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft? Okay, let me explain just a few things. The medical examiner does not speak publicly unless she's called to a court case or a coroner's inquest. That's not her role. She gives her findings to the law enforcement agency. She's been doing this for years and years. Everybody down here knows her, as Sheriff Polk told you. And to our knowledge, she's never been accused of lying or double dipping. There's never been allegations of unethical conduct. And I don't think any of her conclusions have ever been overturned. I think they've all stood up to scrutiny. I may be wrong, I don't know. But now William Anderson, as Polk told you, has a lengthy employment sketchy history. Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft does not. She has basically been in her place of employment. The only time I know that she left, she went to a teaching hospital where she was probably either teaching or she was getting certification in another level of pathology, and then she came back. So, but now William Anderson, in his employment file is a huge documentation of this nasty back and forth allegations of him double dipping. That means he was performing private autopsies on company time. And then he says his boss was lying. His boss says that William Anderson was lying. So that was ugly and nasty. He left the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Then he went to another state agency. He only stayed there a year. Then he went into private practice and he's teaching. And so now he's basically a, quote, expert witness. Well, just because he came forward with this autopsy, blunt force trauma, right neck, unexplained, apparent, non-accidental blunt force trauma, further investigation is indicated. That is not supported by anything else. He claims that it was a dumbbell, and in later interviews he gives, he says it was a 1/2 inch bruise. Must not have been a big dumbbell. Okay, so if that happened, why aren't there any marks on the body to indicate that the body was dragged and put into the mat? Was KJ unconscious when he went in the mat? Because we know for a fact he died upside down in the mat. Okay, was he unconscious when he went in there? If so, why isn't there anything on his wrists and ankles to show that they put him in there? Why is there nothing on videotape to show a rolling and unrolling of the mat? Why is there nothing on videotape that documents people over in that corner leaving in a hurry? There's nothing that documents what he says happened. The only thing that makes sense in light of all of the evidence, and I've showed you articles before where the chief investigator was interviewed, and he said we had forensic evidence, we had witness testimony, and we had physical evidence, all three things. And the only explanation was Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft's. And she says that it was pulmonary, that it was positional asphyxia. Now, William Anderson, he comes out and he says that it can't be positional asphyxia because there was no fluid in the lungs. Okay, in Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft's report, there is a medical journal, and I'm not a doctor, I'm just a general biologist. I have a master's in science, and I've taught high school and college biology. So she had several publications in there. I want to say there was 3 or 5. And here's the diagnosis of PA, positional asphyxia. 3 things. Body must be in a position that obstructs normal gas exchange. It must be impossible to move to another position. And the other causes of natural or violent death must be excluded. That's it. There's nothing about pulmonary edema or fluid in the lungs. So that's why they didn't believe William Anderson. Now, Ash wants to say, well, why didn't Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft come out and speak publicly and talk about this? That's not her role. That's not what she does. The sheriff is the elected official, constitutional elected officer. He speaks to the public. For Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft to talk about her findings publicly, it would have to be in a coroner's inquest, or if Shaveen King, in his lawsuits, decided to call expert witnesses. I told you he filed lawsuits against 40 people, and the lawsuits went on for, I want to say 2 years. So let me explain a little bit about the lawsuit. Okay, I'm not going to have time to get it in this video, so I'm just going to have to come back to part 2 about why Maryanne Gaffney-Kraft couldn't speak in public. Okay, talk to you in a minute.